What's up YouTube, Cheese here, and in today's video we're going to be covering optics. So there's 5 main optics. You have your Reflex, your Holographic, your ACOG, red dot, and iron sight. We're not going to be covering iron sights so much because most of them aren't really viable. Obviously there's a few exemptions to this, but most of the time you're going to be running a sight. So in today's video we're going to basically weigh the pros and cons between all the different optics. I'm going to tell you guys why I personally run Reflex over, say, Holographic. And then by the end of the video, you should be able to decide what the best sight is for you. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. And as always, most importantly, never forget, stay cheesy. Alright, so getting right into things. First optic we're going to cover, and arguably one of the best optics in Siege, is the ACOG. So, the ACOG is one of the only sights to give you any magnification in this game. Obviously, Glaz and Kali, their optics give you magnification as well. But we're mainly just going to be focusing on the universal sights, not really operator-specific sights. So the ACOG has a 2.5 times magnification, which compared to 1 times magnification on the holographic, the red dot, and the reflex, can give you a pretty strong advantage in those longer range gunfights and when you're holding angles. So if you're holding a pixel with an ACOG versus a holographic or reflex, you're going to be able to hold it just a little bit tighter. Some of the downfalls of the ACOG is its peripherals. So as you can tell by what you're seeing on screen right now, the peripheral vision of the ACOG is pretty limited because of how large the casing is itself. ACOG's peripherals cover up 7 3/8 inches on both the left and the right side, or 18.8 centimeters. So when I did these measurements, all I did was take a measuring stick up to my 27-inch monitor. Obviously I'm playing on a 16.9 default aspect ratio for console with a 60 FOV, and all I did was measure the left and the very left side and the very right side of the optic and add those two together. Now I realized that if I wanted to get the total peripheral vision covered, I would have to combine all the measurements around the entire optic itself, but I just wanted to take the left and the right because that will kind of prove my point that I'm trying to make to you guys. So the ACOG, like I just said, covers up a lot of your peripheral vision. Its pros are, you can hold tighter angles and it's better for longer gunfights. But that's really about it when it comes down to the ACOG. Next, moving on to probably the most used sight in the game besides the ACOG, which is the holographic. So the holographic, like the reflex and red dot, is a one-time sight. So you don't have the same magnification as you would with an ACOG, which makes it a little bit harder to hold those tight angles and to hit those longer shots. The peripherals on this are going to be 2 1/8 inches or 5.4 centimeters on the left and right side combined. So the worst part about the holographic is losing again that peripheral vision like the ACOG. So for a 1 times optic, the holographic has the greatest size casing in terms of peripheral vision. So what I mean by this is, like I said, for the ACOG, the left and right side, you lose a lot of vision when you're playing Siege. So when you're ADS down your sights, you lose a ton of vision on your left and your right. And this can really hurt you when you're pushing someone or just holding an angle and someone peeks into you, like you can see here in this clip. If you're holding this angle and you're moving down the hallway, you're not going to see if someone peeks from the left or the right. And I've had this happen to me countless times when I used to run holographic. I would be holding an angle, say on like the end of the hallway on the left side or the right side, and someone would peek into either the right or the left, and I wouldn't be able to see them because the casing of the holographic would cover up them peeking into my sight. Consequently, I would end up losing the gunfight just because I couldn't see the actual target. So now that we've gotten the cons out of the way for the holographic, the pros are pretty simple. And why I think it's the most used 1 times optic in Siege are a few obvious reasons. One, people are just comfortable with it. Back in the day when you used to have to buy your optics, so I don't know if a lot of you guys probably don't remember this, but way back in the days of Siege, you used to have to buy all your attachments with renown. And if you're someone like me who didn't have any renown, you tried to get by with using the least amount of attachments as possible. So basically you would get comfortable with one sight, which for a lot of people is the holographic, and you would just put that sight on every single gun so that you didn't have to buy any other sights. So I think a lot of people just got very comfortable with the holographic, especially because how clean it is. So the sight itself, the inside, you have your red dot and then you have the red circle around that red dot. It's a nice combination between, like a red dot and the holographic sight, because you can kind of aim with the center red dot and you can also aim with that outer circle. Plus, the casing of the holographic looks like it fits a lot of the guns, right? So the bigger casing looks like it just fits on the guns better. Other than that, there aren't really a ton of advantages that the holographic gives you. It's really just the same thing as the Reflex or the red dot. They're both one-time sights. The only real differences between them are the casings, the color of their optics, and the shape. And that's really about it. So moving down to Reflex. This is the optic that I prefer in-game. I used to completely run holographics like everybody else, except for on Bandit where I run iron sights, and that's just because I like how the iron sights look. But anyway, I used to run the holographic. I switched over to Reflex, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, and I never went back. I can still use holo every once in a while, if I forget to switch it on a gun or my attachments get reset or something like that, but I still do prefer the Reflex. Now, a lot of people will disagree with me on this, because they love using holos, and that's completely fine. But for me, I like that the Reflex has the smallest peripheral vision covered. And what I mean by this is the Reflex, measuring on both the left and the right side, only covers up 1 3/8 inch on the left and the right combined, or 3.0 centimeters. So this, in terms of a one-time sight, gives you the best peripheral vision that you can possibly have compared to the holo or the red dot. And that's what I liked about it. So that those couple times, I died holding an angle with a holographic because I couldn't see my target, I said, you know what? I'm never going to have this happen again to me. I'm switching to Reflex, and I never went back. A lot of times people struggle when they switch from holographic to Reflex for the simple reason that when you're using a Reflex, the triangle, you don't actually aim with the center of the triangle. You aim with the tip of the triangle. So a lot of times people will be shooting too high because they're shooting with the center of that triangle and almost like it's a red dot or like a holographic instead of the point. So one thing, and this is kind of how I learned to switch from holographic to Reflex, is imagine that the Reflex is an ACOG sight, but just no magnification. So when you're aiming with an ACOG sight, you are using the very tip of the red arrow to line up your shot. Same thing goes for Reflex. Obviously, the arrow's a little bit smaller, and this isn't everybody's cup of tea, but if you're really trying to transition from holographic to Reflex, that is the kind of the best mindset you can have going into it. So moving on to the last but not least, red dot. Now the red dot has seen quite a few changes over the years, as have all the sights, but the red dot has definitely seen the most. It used to be called the bot dot, just because it was a terrible optic, right? Compared to the holo or the Reflex, the casing was way too big and the sight was way too small, you couldn't see anything. They've made quite a few changes and the optic really isn't bad anymore. It's definitely a comparable to the holo and the Reflex, although there still is that stigma surrounding it that it's not a good optic and you're a bot for using it. But in all reality, it's really not that bad. It's 3 3/8 inch on both the left and the right side, or 8.5 centimeters combined for peripheral vision. So the peripherals aren't great. Really, though, they're only just not great because of that right side where it has the little gauge kind of bumps out. It takes away a lot of your sight on the right. But other than that, the sight itself, the red dot, it's fine for aiming. It's really not a hindrance to your gameplay whatsoever. So, having covered all that, the best sight in terms of peripheral vision is going to be the Reflex. The best sight in terms of magnification is going to be the ACOG. But at the end of the day, when it all said and done, really the best optic for you to use is going to be what you play well with, like what you're most comfortable with. And so what I mean by this is, if you run ACOG on 90% of your guns, every gun that you can, and that's just what you're comfortable with, then stick to it, right? If that's working for you, go for it. If you run red dot or Reflex, go for it. If you're somebody who wants to make the change from, say, holo to reflex because you think that peripheral vision matters, which it does. You know, it does matter. It's not necessarily the biggest determining factor, right? Like it's kind of a small difference, but in terms of competitiveness, it can make a big difference. Like it can be the difference between you winning and losing a round, right? But at the end of the day, it's all personal preference, right? Optic compared to other optics, they're really not that big of differences between them besides color and shape and peripheral vision. That's really about it. But anyways, guys, I hope this helped. I didn't cover, the one other thing I was thinking about covering was color blindness. So I have no experience with this whatsoever, but I know that some people struggle seeing the different colored sights on, say, the ACOG or Reflex, just because, you know, they don't see reds well, or they don't see greens well, and this can be a struggle for them. Obviously, I don't really know how to address that. Siege should have a colorblind mode by now. It's kind of a joke that it doesn't exist, considering how easy it is to do. But that's, I don't know. That's on them, I guess. If you have trouble seeing certain colors, I guess just use the optics that you can see. There's no other way to really put it. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. All of these measurements I did with a ruler, and then I did simple math to add them all up and get it all figured out. The measurements aren't going to be absolutely exact, but the point of it is to just show you where the differences are in peripheral vision, right? So I just wanted to get that idea across. It doesn't really matter if the measurements are completely exact, because it's pretty obvious that, you know, the Reflex has the least peripheral covered compared to ACOG or red dot or holographic. And most of you guys already knew that, but I just wanted to put some numbers out there so you could kind of see it for yourself. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it helped. Hope you can now decide on what optic you want to use in game, what's best for you. If you guys have any questions, leave in the comments below. And as always, most importantly, never forget, stay cheesy. Right. And consequently, dude.
Consequently.
There. Consequently.